Assembling your Super Tooboh model rocket kit. In the Super Tooboh model rocket kit bag, you'll have a set of instructions. For the sake of this video, we will be using just the video only. You have a sub-assembly bag, 2 body tubes, three sets of 2 fin tubes or 6 individual fin tubes, a nose cone, and a parachute kit. In your sub-assembly bag, you'll have a number of small parts, including your decal set, an engine tube, 2 centering rings, a thrust ring, a motor hook, 2 launch lugs, a screw eye, a bulkhead plate, a coupler, and you'll have shock cord as a white elastic shock cord and a yellow Kevlar heat-proof shock cord. The following parts are needed for your motor mount: the motor tube, thrust ring, 2 centering rings, a motor hook, and your shock cord. Take your nose cone and expand one end of your centering rings. Let's lay that side up, and then we'll expand another centering ring using the nose cone. This makes it easier for the centering ring to slide onto your tube. Do not expand your thrust ring. Take your shock cord and tie the white and yellow shock cord together with one overhand knot. Pull tight to make sure that the shock cord is secure. On one end of the yellow shock cord, tie a single knot. Then take your motor hook and insert it into the slot on the motor mount tube that's already cut, and you'll notice there are 2 marks for centering rings. Take your first centering ring, slide it over your motor tube and the motor hook on the bottom end of your motor tube. Then take your yellow shock cord and your other centering ring with the open end facing towards the tube. Put your shock cord through and then slide the centering ring over the tube like so. We're going to glue the centering rings onto the tube, but do not slide the centering ring all the way up between the marks just yet. Take your glue and put a bead of glue around the motor mount between the lines where the centering ring will be slid onto on both pieces. or rather both marked areas of the motor tube. Then slide one centering ring over the glue until it is between the marks. Take the second centering ring and slide it over the tube until it is between the marks. And then pull your shock cord knot up against the centering ring. Make sure it's tight, like so. Then take your tube on the front end of the tube, which is opposite side of the motor hook. Put a bead of glue around the inside, like so. Take your thrust ring and insert it in to that end of the tube and push it until it's flush with the end of the motor tube. You can push down on the table to make sure that it's slid in flush with the end of the motor tube. This is a completed motor mount assembly. We are now going to insert the completed motor mount assembly into the bottom body tube. The bottom body tube has a mark around the perimeter of the tube at the bottom and a mark where the launch lug goes. The upper body tube has only a mark for the launch lug but does not have this perimeter mark. The bottom body tube is what we want to use here. This is where the fin tubes will mount around the perimeter of the body. Take your motor mount and insert the shock cord into the top end and pull it through. We do this so that the shock cord is out of the way as we insert it and glue it into the body tube. Then take and put a bead of glue inside your body tube about 1 inch or so deep. Put plenty of glue in there. Like so. Then take your motor mount with the top end opposite the hook end. Insert it into the bottom of the body tube with the motor hook lined up with the line on the launch lug. And then push it in until the bottom of the motor mount tube is flush with the body tube. Now take one launch lug and put a bead of glue along the edge of the launch lug, along the length, like so. And then where it's marked on the body tube, right there, attach your launch lug. And square it up with the tube so the bottom is right at the line. It's between the marks on the body tube and it's straight down the center line of the body tube. You can make sure that the launch lug is lined up with the body tube by putting it flat on the table and rolling it until the launch lug and the body tube are both touching the table and both flush with the table. Now that the launch lug is aligned, we're going to set aside the body tube with the motor mount and launch lug to dry. Take your 6 fin tubes and glue them together in 3 pairs. Take 1 fin tube and put a bead of glue along the length, like so. Take another fin tube and attach it, put it flush on the table so that it's square, and this is 1 pair we'll set aside to dry. Take another tube and do the same. Set this aside to dry. And another. And we'll set this aside to dry. All 3 tubes dry completely. 2 pairs. We'll set them aside to dry. Take your upper body tube, your coupler, your bulkhead plate, your screw eye, and the upper body tube launch lug. Put a bead of glue around the inside of the upper body tube. Do this at the end where the launch lug line is marked. Just a little bit of glue around the inside edge. Like so. Insert your coupler, rotate it into the glue, push it into the body tube until the line on the coupler is flush with the edge. This will be halfway inserted. Take your bulkhead plate and put a drop of glue on. Insert your screw eye and screw into the glue right at the center of the bulkhead plate, like so. Put a thin bead of glue around the inside of the coupler. Like so. And insert your bulkhead plate. Until it is flush with the bottom of the coupler. This completes your bulkhead section. And now take your launch lug and put a thin bead of glue along the length of the launch lug. And as before on the bottom body tube, put your launch lug on the area marked on the body tube, like so. Again, you can put it on the table, make sure both are flush. And this is the completed payload section. Together with the nose cone, this is the upper body section. and can be used as a payload section. Set this aside to dry. Now that your lower body tube and your fin tube pairs are dry, we can attach these to the lower body tube. Take your glue and put a thin bead of glue on both fin tubes. This is the center line here. You want to put it inside the center line, about a 1/2 inch, 5/8 inch apart, where it will touch the body tube. And then put a thin bead of glue along the launch lug on one edge. Attach your first fin tube pair to the body tube and against the launch lug so that the fin tube pair is flush with the mark around the body tube. It is against the launch lug, and both fin tubes are against the body tube with glue attaching them. Take your second tube pair and do the same by putting glue a little bit off the center line towards the center between the tubes, where the body tube will be touching the fin tubes, and then on one side of one fin tube only, put a bead of glue about equal distance from the center line as the other bead of glue is. Then take this tube pair and attach it to your body tube. First, touch the glue to the first fin tube pair and roll it onto the body tube. So there's glue between these two tubes and glue between each fin tube, this fin tube pair and the body tube. Again, slide it to the line so that all the fin tubes are lined up with the line around the perimeter of the body tube. Take your last fin tube pair, and we want to put a bead of glue along the length of the launch lug, just where the fin tube will touch the launch lug. Again, another bead of glue, like so, and one more just off the center line this way, equal distance from the center line of the tube. This line will touch the other fin tube pair, so first touch it to the second fin tube pair so that the glue touches, and then roll this down onto the body tube. So there's glue between this tube pair and this tube pair, and on each of the fin tubes where it touches the body tube, and also it's glued where it touches the launch lug. Again, slide the tube pair until it lines up with the line around the perimeter of the tube. Now you can rotate and check the alignment of all the tubes with each other and with the body tube, making sure they're all aligned and they're square and lined up with the center line of the body tube, like so. Set this aside to dry. While our rocket fins are drying, we can assemble our parachute. Open up your parachute bag and remove the contents, which will include a folded parachute, six tape discs on a strip, and the parachute shroud lines. The parachute has instructions on the parachute how to assemble the parachute here and here. If needed, you can use those instructions, but let's just cut along the edge of the parachute where the dotted line is. On all six sides. Take your shock cord and pull the tape off. We're going to separate the shock cord into 3 equal lengths. Take 2 ends of the shock cord, put one in your opposite finger and the other in the opposite finger of the opposite hand, and with your fingers inside the loop, pull until you have the shock cord in 3 equal lengths. Take one end and pinch and cut off all 3 shock cords to the same length. While holding this end tight, string the shock cords through your fingers till you reach the other end, and cut these to the same length. Now you have 3 separate shock cords of equal length. Take your tape discs, and there are 6 individual tape discs on the strip, and peel back one of the tape discs and put it on the marked areas of this parachute. Do this for all 6 discs. Take a small blunt instrument like a toothpick or a bent paper clip or a pencil or pen and punch a hole inside each center of each tape disc. Take one loop of your shroud line and pass through the tape disc and tie a double knot pull it tight and check that the knot is tight. Take the other end and pass it through the center of the tape disc. Tie another double knot. Pull it tight, check that it is tight. And we'll do this side by side on two adjacent tape discs. So we have one loop. We're going to do 3 of these loops. Rotate your parachute to the next tape disc. Pass your shock cord through, tie a double knot, check that it's tight, now we have 3 separate loops, which will become a total of 6 shroud lines. Now let's fold our let's fold our parachute and so fold until you have lined up the tape discs of the parachute, then fold again, lining up the other 2 tape discs, and fold again, lining up the final 2 tape discs, so they're all in one line straight through. While holding the parachute, pull your shroud lines through your fingers to make them all the same length. And then take on the end of the parachute, while holding it, tie one single overhand knot to keep the parachute lines all the same length. And this is a completed parachute. Now that our parachute is completed, we can attach our recovery system to the rocket. We also have our bottom portion of the rocket with the body tube, the tube fins, the motor hook, and the upper section of the body tube, which is also a payload section. To assemble the recovery system, we need to first slide the shock cord down through the body tube and bring it out the top side, like so. And then we're going to tie the white end of the shock cord to the upper body tube section or payload section with a double knot. Tie a double knot onto the screw eye in the bulkhead. Like so. Pull tight, make sure the knot doesn't slip. Then take the shroud line end of the parachute, pass it through the screw eye as well, and tie a double knot to secure it to the screw eye on the bulkhead. Pull tight, making sure it's secure. When getting ready for the launch of the rocket, we will be putting parachute wadding in this bottom section to protect the parachute from the ejection charge. But for now, we're just going to pack the parachute into the rocket in order to be able to apply the decals to the rocket. So we're going to fold the parachute as if we're going to prepare it for launch. Fold it, and then fold it lengthwise, and then roll it up tight. Small enough that it will fit inside the body tube. Take your parachute lines and roll them on the outside of the parachute, like so. Do not twist around, roll them on. Now we'll push the parachute inside the body tube and gather the shock cord together. And push this inside the body tube as well. Then put your payload section or upper body tube section into the rocket. When we're getting ready for launch, we'll have these aligned, the launch lugs aligned so that it'll slide easily on the launch rod. Now that your rocket is completed, we're going to apply the decals. Take the first decal, Super, and we can either apply it opposite the launch lugs or 90 degrees to the launch lugs, like about here. Usually in the line with this fin tube, which is 90 degrees to the launch lug line. And we'll remove the Tooboh decal and apply it in line with the Super about so. If you need to realign it, it's best to realign it now before it becomes permanent. You can still lift it up a few minutes after you've applied it. The longer you wait, the more permanent the decal bond becomes. Now we'll take each fin decal and apply them to the fin about halfway this way, and also perpendicular to the tube line in the center between these 2 points on the other fin tubes. Do the same for all 6 fin tubes. And there's our completed Super Tooboh ready to fly. We're going to prepare the Super Tooboh now for flight. The first thing, we need to make sure that we do not lose this nose cone, because it's not attached to a shock cord and it's simply placed in the payload section. It can slip out and separate. So we attach a little masking tape around the perimeter of the nose cone at the shoulder. A couple of layers is sufficient so that it fits tightly. Into the payload section. Check the fit and make sure it's secure and tight. Now we're going to prepare the recovery system for flight by placing some recovery wadding. For a rocket the size of the Super Tooboh, 2 or 3 sheets of recovering wadding is all that's needed. Enough so that when you wad it up, the wad is equal to the diameter of the body tube and about 2 lengths of the width of the body tube. And push that into the bottom body tube. Recovery system goes into the bottom section, not in the upper section. We'll refold the parachute Normally when your parachute's unfolded, just simply fold it in half, then in quarter, then an eighth, okay, and fold it again. So the width is about 3 or 4 length widths of the body tube, and then fold once and roll up tightly. Then wrap, instead of wrapping the parachute lines around or shroud lines, roll them onto the parachute so they don't twist and tangle. Now this is rolled tightly enough to fit easily into the body tube, so it's easily ejected during ejection. Put it into the bottom body tube, gather your shock cords, and push them in after the parachute, and then put your upper body tube section or payload section into the lower body tube. The recovery system is now ready to go. Now we're going to insert the engine and igniter so we're ready for flight. Take your model rocket engine and check the fit. It should fit easily into the tube. Depending on the engine manufacturer or even the batch of engines, sometimes the engine itself is very tight. In that case, you'd have to really take a thin layer of paper off the outside of the engine. The engine manufacturer generally has a recommendation on how to do this without damaging the engine. Enough so that the engine will slip easily into place. And you push it in till it locks into the motor hook. Every engine manufacturer has a different recommendation for igniter usage, but I'll show you one method. This particular igniter we insert in, and it has a plug that comes with it. And the plug goes in the engine nozzle to hold the igniter in. Usually it's best to install the igniter leads away from the engine hook, which is also lined up with the launch lug end, so when it's on the launch rod you can easily hook up the igniter clips to either side without having the launch rod in the way. So that's our Super Tooboh model rocket ready to fly.